the Valley of the Beast. It looked, in the morning sunlight, entrancing. The trees closed in behind him, but he did not notice. It led him on. He followed the track of the gigantic moose he meant to kill, and the sweet, delicious sunshine helped him. The air was like wine, the seductive spoor of the great beast, with here and there a faint splash of blood on leaves or ground, lay forever just before his eyes. He found the valley, though the actual word did not occur to him, enticing. More and more he noticed the beauty, the desolate grandeur of the mighty spruce and hemlock, the splendor of the granite bluffs, which in places rose above the forest and caught the sun. The valley was deeper, vaster than he had imagined. He felt safe, at home in it, though again these actual terms did not occur to him. Here he could hide forever and find peace. He became aware of a new quality in the deep loneliness. The scenery, for the first time in his life, appealed to him, and the form of appeal was curious. He felt the comfort of it. For a man of his habit, this was odd, yet the new sensation stole over him so gently, their approach so gradual, that they were first recognized by his consciousness indirectly. They had already established themselves in him before he noticed them, and the indirectness took this form, that the passion of the chase gave place to an interest in the valley itself. The lust of the hunt, the fierce desire to find and kill, the keen wish, in a word, to see his quarry within range, to aim, to fire, to witness the natural consummation of the long expedition, these had all become measurably less, while the effect of the valley upon him had increased in strength. There was a welcome about it that he did not understand. The change was singular, yet, oddly enough, it did not occur to him as singular. It was unnatural, yet it did not strike him so. To a dull mind of his unobservant, unanalytical type, a change had to be marked and dramatic before he noticed it. Something in the nature of a shock must accompany it for him to recognize it had happened. And there had been no shock. The spoor of the great moose was much clearer, now that he caught up with the animal that had made it. The blood more frequent. He had noticed the spot where it had rested, its huge body leaving a marked imprint on the soft ground where it had reached up to eat the leaves of saplings here and there was also visible. He had come undoubtedly very near to it, and any minute now might see its great bulk within range of an easy shot. Yet his ardor had somehow lessened. He first realized this change in himself when it suddenly occurred to him that the animal itself had grown less cautious. It must scent him easily now, since a moose, its sight being indifferent, depends chiefly for its safety upon its unusually keen sense of smell, and the wind came from behind him. This now struck him as decidedly uncommon. The moose itself was obviously careless of his close approach. It felt no fear. It was this inexplicable alteration in the animal's behavior that made him recognize, at last, the alteration in his own. He had followed it now for a couple of hours, and had descended some 800 to 1,000 feet. The trees were thinner and more sparsely placed. There were open, park-like places where silver birch, sumac, and maple splashed their blazing colors, and a crystal stream, broken by many waterfalls, foamed past toward the bed of the great valley, yet another 1,000 feet below. By a quiet pool against some overarching rocks, the moose had evidently paused to drink, paused at its leisure, moreover. Grimwood, rising from a close examination of the direction the creature had taken after drinking, the hoof marks were fresh and very distinct in the marshy ground about the pool, looked suddenly straight into the great creature's eyes. It was not 20 yards from where he stood, yet he had been standing on that spot for at least 10 minutes, caught by the wonder and loneliness of the scene. The moose, therefore, had been close beside him all this time. It had been calmly drinking, undisturbed by his presence, unafraid. The shock came now, the shock that woke his heavy nature into realization. For some seconds, probably for minutes, he stood rooted to the ground, motionless, hardly breathing. He stared as though he saw a vision. The animal's head was lowered, but turned obliquely somewhat, so that the eyes, placed sideways in its great head, could see him properly. Its immense proboscis hung as though stuffed upon an English wall. He saw the forefeet planted wide apart, the slope of the enormous shoulders dropping back toward the fine hindquarters and lean flanks. It was a magnificent bull. The horns and head justified his wildest expectations. They were superb, a record specimen, and a phrase, where had he heard it, ran vaguely as from far distance through his mind. The biggest moose in the world. There was the extraordinary fact, however, that he did not shoot, nor feel the wish to shoot. The familiar instinct, so strongly hitherto in his blood, made no sign. The desire to kill, apparently, had left him. To raise his rifle, aim and fire had become suddenly an absolute impossibility. He did not move. The animal and the human stared into each other's eyes for a length of time whose interval he could not measure. Then came a soft noise close behind him. The rifle had slipped from his grasp and fallen with a thud into the mossy earth at his feet. And the moose, for the first time now, was moving. With slow, easy stride, its great weight causing a squelching sound as the feet drew out of the moist ground, it came towards him, the bulk of the shoulders giving it an appearance of swaying like a ship at sea. It reached his side. It almost touched him. The magnificent head bent low. The spread of the gigantic horns lay beneath his very eyes. He could have patted it, stroked it. He saw, with a touch of pity, that blood trickled from a sore in its left shoulder, matting the thick hair. It sniffed the fallen rifle. Then, lifting its head and shoulders again, it sniffed the air, this time with an audible sound that shook from Grimwood's mind the last possibility that he witnessed a vision or dreamed a dream. One moment it gazed into his face, its big brown eyes shining and unafraid, then turned abruptly and swung away at a speed ever rapidly increasing across the park-like spaces till it was lost, finally in the dark tangle of undergrowth beyond. And the Englishman's muscles turned to paper, his paralysis passed, his legs refused to support his weight, and he sank heavily to the ground. 3. It seems he slept long and heavily. He sat up, stretched himself, yawned and rubbed his eyes. The sun had moved across the sky, for the shadows he saw now ran from west to east, and there were long shadows. He had slept evidently for hours, and evening was drawing in. He was aware that he felt hungry. In his pouch-like pockets he had dried meat, sugar, matches, tea, and the little billy that never left him. He would make a fire, boil some tea, and eat. But he took no steps to carry out his purpose. He felt disinclined to move. He sat thinking. What was he thinking about? He did not know. He could not say exactly. It was more like fugitive pictures that passed across his mind. Who and where was he? This was the Valley of the Beasts, that he knew. He felt sure of nothing else. How long had he been here, and where had he come from, and why? The questions did not linger for their answers, almost as though his interest in them was merely automatic. He felt happy, peaceful, unafraid. He looked about him, and the spell of this virgin forest came upon him like a charm. Only the sound of falling water, the murmur of wind sighing among innumerable branches broke the enveloping silence. Overhead, beyond the crests of the towering trees, a cloudless evening sky was paling into transparent orange, opal, mother of pearl. He saw buzzards soaring lazily. A scarlet tanager flashed by. Soon would the owls begin to call, and the darkness fall like a sweet black veil and hide all detail, while the stars sparkled in their countless thousands. A glint of something that shone upon the ground caught his eye. A smooth, polished strip of rounded metal. His rifle. And he started to his feet impulsively, yet not knowing exactly what he meant to do. At the sight of the weapon, something had leaped to life in him, then faded out, died down, and was gone again. I'm... he began muttering to himself, but could not finish what he was about to say. His name had disappeared completely. I'm in the Valley of the Beast, he repeated in place of what he sought but could not find. This fact, That he was in the Valley of the Beast seemed the only positive island of knowledge that he had. About the name something known and familiar clung, though the sequence that had led up to it he could not trace. Presently, nevertheless, he rose to his feet, advanced a few steps, stooped, and picked up the shining metal thing, his rifle. He examined it a moment, a feeling of dread and loathing rising in him, a sensation of almost horror that made him tremble. Then, with a convulsive movement that betrayed an intense reaction of some sort he could not comprehend, he flung the thing far from him into the foaming torrent. He saw the splash it made. He also saw that same instant a large grizzly bear swing heavily along the bank not a dozen yards from where he stood. It too heard the splash, for it started, ruined, paused a second, then changed its direction and came toward him. It came up close. Its fur brushed his body. It examined him leisurely, as the moose had done, sniffed, half rose upon its terrible hind legs, opened its mouth so that red tongue and gleaming teeth were plainly visible, then flopped back upon all fours again with a deep growl that yet had no anger in it, and swung off at a quick trot back to the bank of the torrent. He had felt its hot breath upon his face, but he had felt no fear. The monster was puzzled, but not hostile. It disappeared. "They know not." He sought for the word man, but could not find it. "They have never been hunted." The words ran through his mind, if perhaps he was not entirely certain of their meaning. They rose, as it were, automatically. A familiar sound lay in them somewhere. At the same time there rose feelings in him that were equally, though in another way, familiar and quite natural, feelings he had once known intimately but long since laid aside. What were they? What was their origin? They seemed distant as the stars, yet were actually in his body, in his blood and nerves, part and parcel of his flesh. Long, long ago. Oh, how long, how long? Thinking was difficult. Feeling was what he most easily and naturally managed. He could not think for long. Feeling rose up and drowned the effort quickly. That huge and awful bear. Not a nerve, not a muscle quivered in him as its acrid smell rose to his nostrils. Its fur brushed down his legs. Yet he was aware that somewhere there was danger, though not here. Somewhere there was attack, hostility, wicked and calculated plans against him, as against that splendid roaming animal that had sniffed, examined, then gone its own way satisfied. Yes, active attack, hostility and careful, cruel plans against his safety, but not here. Here he was safe, secure, at peace. Here he was happy. Here he could roam at will, no eye cast sideways into forest depths, no ear pricked high to catch sounds not explained, no nostrils quivering to scent alarm. He felt this, but he did not think it. He felt hungry, thirsty too. Something prompted him now at last to act. His billy lay at his feet, and he picked it up. The matches, he carried them in a metal case whose screw top kept out all moisture, were in his hand. Gathering a few dry twigs, he stooped to light them, then suddenly drew back with the first touch of fear he had yet known. Fire! What was fire? The idea was repugnant to him. It was impossible. He was afraid of fire. He flung the metal case after the rifle and saw it gleam in the last rays of sunset, then sink with a little splash beneath the water. Glancing down at his billy, he realized next that he could not make use of it either, nor of the dark, dry, dusty stuff he had meant to boil in water. He felt no repugnance, certainly no fear in connection with these things, only he could not handle them. He did not need them. He had forgotten, yes, forgotten what they meant exactly. This strange forgetfulness was increasing in him rapidly, becoming more and more complete with every minute. Yet his thirst must be quenched. The next moment he found himself at the water's edge. He stooped to fill his billy, paused, hesitated, examined the rushing water, then abruptly moved a few feet higher up the stream, leaving the metal can behind him. His handling of it had been oddly clumsy. his gestures awkward, even unnatural. He now flung himself down with an easy, simple motion of his entire body, lowered his face to a quiet pool he had found, and drank his fill of the cool, refreshing liquid. But though unaware of the fact, he did not drink. He lapped.